I'm trying really hard not to cry. So let's see what's this year. So 8 years ago, I lost my soul mutt, Bert. He was a Basset Hound, Great Pyrenees, and he was my CPR demo dog. And so we traveled all over the place and we did lots and lots of events. He taught all my classes with me. He was awesome. He was 5 feet long, 2 feet tall. So Great Pyrenees in a Basset body, right? Like,
oh my God, that's amazing.
On steroids. Yeah, I'll show you a picture sometime. It's fantastic. Anyway, so he did all my classes with me, and obviously he was fantastic for marketing because people stopped me wherever I was and like, what is that? And you can't forget him. Like, you see a dog like that, you're like, whoa. So he was phenomenal. He was a great dog. Like, he just was so low key, so chill, like totally my spirit animal. And we had a great run. And unfortunately, I fostered too many. I burnt myself out, and took on too much years ago in my life before my daughter, and was taking on too many fosters at the same time. I was pet sitting. I was just too much. And I had been pet sitting a job for about a week and came home. I was pet sitting my own dogs basically, but staying at a client's house. And so I come home the next morning. The night before, I was like, oh, it's the last night. It's fine. I'll let all the dogs be in the same room together. And I had never had any issues before, but I remember like had this feeling of like, maybe I shouldn't. And then I was like, no, it's fine. It's fine. Next morning, I came home to a bloodbath, and one of my fosters had gotten out of her kennel and a fight had ensued. Unfortunately, I was there, so I have no idea what happened.
What instigated it?
No idea. I suspect, based on other injuries and stuff, it was 2 females going after each other. And then Bert was a really good referee. Like, he was fantastic in play sessions because he would break fights up, break scuffles up, break tension up. Like, he was really good at what we call splitting, right? So he would get in between the dogs and split them up. Anyway, but I think that the fight, they just redirected on him because he was covered in puncture wounds. And anyway, so when I got home, he was in shock, and I rushed him to the vet because, I mean, there's a point that it's like, you don't even do anything else, right? You just take him to the vet. And so I took him, and he fell into acute kidney failure. And so he stayed 5 days in the hospital. Luckily, I worked at the hospital at the time, so I did not leave him. And I was running the daycare and doing training. And so I wasn't a tech at that hospital. And so I just took time off from my job and I stayed at the hospital, the same company. But anyway, so we started to see some improvements. And so we were feeling pretty good about stuff. And you just never think it's going to happen. You just don't, even when you know that there's always that possibility. I knew he was critical, but I just never thought it would happen to him ever. And I'd gone home one night, and I was like, okay, I was on the phone with the vet, and it was late. It was like 10 o'clock, and I'd gone home to take a shower. I'd been at the hospital for 5 days basically and hadn't left. And so I took a shower, I ate, I went back to the clinic to sleep on the floor with him, and he was barking real weird. And I was like, what's going on with him? So I got off the phone. I was like, hey, he's barking. Let me call you back. So I thought he just needed a potty. And so I unhooked his IV. I let him out. And he was in so much pain that we weren't walking him. He was just coming out of the kennel and peeing right there. Yeah. So I towel underneath him to catch it. But that movement basically of coming out of the kennel, he collapsed. And like, I went to catch him and he died like instantly.
Oh my God, how traumatic for you. I'm so sorry.
My whole world I was so, like, he was my kid. He went everywhere with me. He did all my sessions with me. He went to work with me. He went to my classes with me. Like, he was literally with me all the time. And he was 12. And so, and I'd gotten him in my 20s. And so it was like, it's that dog that grows up with you in your 20s and goes through all the jobs, all the houses, while you're finding yourself and all that. And he was that dog for me. And so, like, he was absolutely my kid. And I had to do CPR on my own CPR dog. And, I can do this training with like the back of my hand. Like, I can repeat it without a PowerPoint. Like, I know what to do, but you don't ever think it's going to happen to you, right? And the likelihood, I mean, let's be real, the likelihood for most pet parents is that they probably aren't going to ever have to do CPR. CPR is what pulls people into the class. They're like, oh, I need to know what to do. But the likelihood is most people would never have to do it. I was in a hospital, but it was not my hospital. So I didn't know where the trach tubes were. I didn't know where the oxygen was. I was by myself with a 120-pound dog who was dead weight. So I couldn't get him to where I needed him to be, and I had no help, right? And so I was in that situation, the exact situation that I teach about, of like, what do you do if you're not in a hospital, if you don't have a vet, if you don't have any of the tools? I mean, everybody like, I just take him to my vet. Yes, but what if you don't have all that and the dog collapses in front of you? What do you do, right? And so even though I was in a situation that technically I should have known, I should have figured out where the crash cart was, I should have figured out where all the oxygen was, but I didn't, because I didn't think it was going to happen, right? So anyway, I did CPR. I had 1% on my battery, which is another piece that I always tell people is Murphy's Law, right? You need your battery, and all of a sudden you just didn't charge it, right? And so I had 1% on my battery. I hadn't charged it yet. I just got in there. I was going to plug it in. So I called the vet back and I screamed, he crashed. And she's like, call the nurses. And so I called 2 nurses. It took everybody 20 minutes to get there. They just weren't right around the corner. So, but 20 minutes in, I was still doing CPR. I mean, it felt like hours. I mean, it just felt like so long. And I mean, I'm just continuing to do these compressions and these breaths, and he's so big and I'm on the floor and it's uncomfortable. And you just don't think about all that stuff when you're like thinking about doing a class. You don't understand, like, until you're in that moment, how hard this really is. And I was completely out of breath. And the other thing that we encourage people to do is to rotate people in, right? So like, you don't want to continue to do CPR. You want people to jump in, and people are like, no, I can do it. And it's their dog and they want to save them. And I'm like, no, 20 minutes in, my breaths were not effective. Right. My compressions were weaker because I've been doing it for 20 minutes. It's such a physical thing. And you have your adrenaline rush and your panic and all your emotions that come up. And I mean, I remember thinking the moment he crashed, all I want to do is scream. I mean, because my life completely flashed before me and I wanted to just cry and scream. And you can't do that and do CPR. So you have to make a conscious choice to go, nope, I'm saving this dog. And here's the bottom line. It didn't work. Yeah. And it doesn't always work. Right. And I questioned everything. I questioned how I did it. But I mean, literally, I couldn't have been more prepared. Right. Except for knowing where the crash cart was, or knowing, that's the other things I could have done, but I knew how to do it, but we don't really know what happened. We figure he had an arrhythmia or through a clot or something like that. And CPR wasn't going to fix any of that anyway. But, what I tell most of my students is, look, yes, this class obviously teaches you CPR and you should know what to do in case your pet crashes. But most of what this class is about is, one, prevention, so that you know what you don't know, right? You know that there are things out there that might happen that you've never even thought of. And you can prevent them just by knowing that there are even possibilities. And there's lots of things we show you and teach you so that you are more prepared, so that you avoid incidents where that potentially can happen. But most importantly is, when you're in a situation that you can't control and you can't save your pet, you can find closure in knowing that you did way more than most people. And you did everything you could in the moment that you had, using the resources that you had. You did everything you could, which most people, if they haven't taken a pet CPR and first aid course, they can't say, and so you have closure in that, and it doesn't make it any easier. I mean, it doesn't, but later, after you come out of the clouds, you do realize that, you gave that dog a chance. Otherwise, you end up joining my class afterwards and going, oh my God, I could have done something different. And then there's the whole what if game.